Hey everyone, after a little break I'm back with another video, and today we're going to be talking about another handheld announcement. It seems like new handheld PC combos are popping up all over the place, and with CES wrapping up, it looks like MSI decided to grace us with yet another one to consider buying. But before you decide if you should add this to your gaming rotation, let's look at what we know, how this thing compares to what we already have out there, and if this thing is actually worth it. So with that out of the way, let's jump right into the nitty gritty. Okay, so first off, this new PC handheld is called the MSI Claw, and while I don't think it's the most appealing name, at the rate these handhelds are coming out, most names are probably taken by now. What's probably more important is that it looks like MSI is going to try and release this in the first half of 2024, which last time I checked is now, so hopefully we'll see this in people's hands soon, because looking at specs and comparing to things on the market can only count for so much. But speaking of specs, how does this thing compare to something like the Steam Deck? Well, after a quick comparison, some aspects look promising, but a lot of what I've heard of the things left me wanting more, so we're just going to go over it real quick. Let's start with the positives. This thing is comparable to the 1TB Steam Deck in a lot of ways. It boasts a 1920 by 1080 touchscreen compared to the Steam Deck's 1280 by 800 one. This might seem like a clear-cut win for the Claw, but I think it comes down to preference when you look past resolution. The Claw is using an IPS display running at 120Hz, while the Steam Deck is using that HDR OLED display running at 90Hz. What this effectively means is that the colors are probably going to be great for both, but the Steam Deck is going to have darker blacks and a wider range of contrast, while the Claw will most likely run a bit smoother. Like I said, this will probably come down to preference, but I personally think I would take the lower resolution for those more vibrant colors overall. Another big thing people might be interested in is battery life and how much playtime you'll actually be able to get out of this thing unplugged. The Claw is listed having a 53 watt-hour battery, which according to CNET adds up to 2 hours in full performance mode when they tested it out. Now that might sound bad, horrible even, but that is in full performance while playing most likely newer games. The reality is probably a lot more variable. When you compare that to the Steam Deck, it's lagging a bit, but not as bad as you would think. Steam Deck OLED is running a 50 watt-hour battery that they estimate will translate to approximately 3 to 12 hours of gameplay, and given the specs, that could end up being very likely for the Claw as well. It's at least a lot closer than it might appear at first, which is promising. But what is this thing running that it dies so fast? I don't think it will really come as a surprise that it's running some pretty beefy hardware for a handheld, boasting an Intel CPU and graphics processor. On top of that, it's also running Windows 11 as its main operating system as opposed to the Steam Deck's SteamOS. As for the nitty gritty of all these things, I'm not personally as confident as to what is 100% better than what, but it all looks very comparable to me. Just to be safe, I'm going to put up all the software specs on the screen so you can compare it for yourself. Alongside that, I'm also going to be linking to the Claw spec page as well as the one for the Steam Deck, just in case you want to dive in any deeper than myself. Since I didn't cover everything, just what I would consider the broad strokes I think is important to know before buying one of these things. With that being said, I'm going to be covering one last thing in my comparison of these two products before I start to wrap things up, that being the actual size and weight of the thing. The Claw itself is a little heftier while being overall smaller than the Steam Deck. Altogether, it weighs 675 grams compared to the Steam Deck's 640. That's not a huge difference, but when you're gaming for extended periods, every little bit matters, and your arms can end up getting tired a whole lot quicker. As for the dimensions, the Claw is 294 by 117 by 21.2 millimeters. Almost exactly the same as the Steam Deck's 298 by 117 by 49 millimeters, save for that last measurement, which means the Claw will be a little less than half as thick. Now overall, that also seems great, and I am hopeful for that, but depending on the design, it could make it awkward to hold. And that's pretty much everything I think you really need to know about this new handheld. It's going to start at a price of $699 for the base model, compared to $649 for the most expensive version of the Steam Deck currently available. Not really much else to say on that front. You probably won't pick something like this up unless you are interested in those new handhelds as a whole, or the hands-on reviews start to come out and it turns out that this blows everything out of the water. At least that's how I see it. So there you have it, everyone. A new handheld coming very soon, and everything I would think you really need to know about it before you buy one. I think after looking at everything the MSI Claw has to offer, it would be very easy to say that it will just end up being a slightly more expensive, less popular Steam Deck ripoff, and that very well might be true. But I hope it isn't. As more and more of these new handhelds come into the market, I have high hopes for the future of handheld gaming and pushing those limits even further beyond what consoles have had to offer for a while. In my opinion, the Claw will only stoke those fires even more. But as always, I'm interested in what you all think. Is the Claw something you're interested in? And if so, are you interested at this relatively steep price point? Let me know down in the comments. I would love to read what you all have to say, and with that, I thank you all for watching, and I'll see you very soon for the next video. Won't be as long of a wait as last time, hopefully. Have a good one. Bye.